great scientists, they would argue that, particularly those who are working on the pure sciences, they would say that no, pure science is exclusively, science. I mean, it cannot cut across the boundaries. There are certain elements that are being added into that and whenever you're arguing. But argument is that at the same time, science is also social. Science can be scientific, and that's the reason the whole argument of positivist comes here. Why science is scientific? There are reasons for that. But at the same time, why science is social? When I give the example of Galileo, Newton, or Einstein. For example, when you look at the arguments, there are two kinds of argument. One is the theoretical argument. The second is the application of the science. Science, that there is another argument also we need to understand. Science is not for the purpose of generating knowledge. Science itself, even though it might create knowledge by itself, but that doesn't mean that it is completely contained. The knowledge is completely contained. And that's the reason why the argument is that the science cannot be restricted to its own framework. It cannot be restricted to the four walls. That's the reason why there are scientists. One side, we have got a scientist who try to say that, look, science cannot negotiate with the social sciences. And at the same time, they also saying that science cannot negotiate with the human beings, cannot be social. It cannot interact. That means that there is a boundary between the science and the human beings. So the whole argument is that science needs to be applied. If to acquire knowledge, you cannot acquire the knowledge by deducing from the abstract. From the abstract like the space, or abstract like the gas. But we need to apply that one to the cause of the human beings. Look at the argument about the Galileo. What happened to Galileo? Galileo argued against against the theory of rotation of the earth. That was against the church, remember. Church, banished him. You might be knowing about that fact. Why church banished a scientist like Galileo? There are other things also, like for example, the way the Socrates, who consumed poison, hemlock, something. Because he was telling the truth. That was a different thing. And the whole question is that what constitutes the truth? Or what science says is the truth? Whether the truth is everlasting. So the application of science is always vis-a-vis the common man, citizens, or for the public good. For example, let me take up the argument about the new technology in agriculture. New technology in agriculture was applied to the agriculture sector to overcome what is called the hunger. Or it also came with the issue of what is called the grow more food. At the time, India was reeling under poverty, deep poverty. India was literally backward. There is a food deficit. Norman Borlaug came out with the argument of new technology in agriculture. It was scientific investigation, discovery. Because he came out with what's called high yielding varieties. Was it not meant for public good? Was it not meant for the larger public? But the question remains. The question is that whether the scientific discovery will solve these social problems. One is that it's social now. Because every scientific discovery ultimately has to have its application. It cannot remain, a issue of this laboratory. But it can be, when you talk about the scientific method, when you're applying the scientific method to the social science, probably this argument holds good. Why we should bring this scientific method into the, social sciences? What are the methods that are being adopted here? But the question is that if you look at the science, one side science is trying to negotiate with the social sciences for the production of the knowledge. We should understand the fact that most of the scientific discoveries are done vis-a-vis the citizens, vis-a-vis the common man, vis-a-vis the, what's called the social categories. So that's the reason why scientific knowledge is the result of the interaction with the, social identity, social categories, one side. The second is that whether this scientific discovery will always solve the problem. This is the second argument that has been made in Indian context or elsewhere. Will they solve the everyday problems? When you're using scientific methods, scientific discoveries, whether this will lead to the complete solution to the common man, common problems, like poverty. Let me take up the poverty issue. In the 1960s, let me get into one example of the 1960s. When Green Revolution was introduced in India, everybody thought that it might help in food sufficiency, food surplus. It will reduce the poverty level. It will also reduce the gap between the rich and the poor. Even a regional variation, it might, bring it down. It also brings it down social inequality. It might have brought down food deficiency, but the thing is that poverty level was still existing. The agricultural laborers then, in the midst of new technology that was adopted, the people, particularly the backward classes, particularly the Dalits, or the agricultural laborers, were living on feed the rats for their survival. Look at the stark contradiction in the application of the science. It is also said that it led to conflict, severe conflict. Like, for example, it was then that time that 12 Dalits were killed in Tanjore, just because these agricultural laborers asked for more wages. Look at here, the scientific technology, science, which are supposed to bring equality, social equality, ultimately creating conditions for the social inequality, social conflict. Rather, it increased. That's the reason why I said the argument was that science might end up in creating what is called red. In that context, the scientific discovery, look at the discovery of the nuclear armaments. That's the best example. Why these nuclear armaments became a big threat? Why was it experimented on Nagasaki and Hiroshima? Why did not they experiment, other than Nevada, on Chicago, wherein they actually experimented with? I mean, initial experiment was done. Neither they exploded the same, atom bomb on New York or Washington DC, rather than they tried to do it in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. You know the reason for that? The reason was simple, but horrible. They wanted to experiment these atom bombs onto these virgin lands, or what is called the virgin people. Innocent, unknown, were not perceptible to the changes, discoveries and other things. They wanted to experiment on that. So they ultimately, people become the victim. They suffer. Look at, this is not the case even in the pharmaceutical company. Discovery of some tablets. Who prompted First World War? This was nothing but a company called the Pfizer. A Pfizer company which discovered the new tablets, new medicines. And they wanted to sell it off and to create a market for their goods. Their discovery was meant for war. And why the latest argument, if you read the argument, the conflict between the Hamas or the Palestinians and Israel, who is the person who is literally laughing, who is happy in this particular conflict? The person is industry and military complexes. Military complexes wanted to sell it off, its arms, because that would generate the jobs in the United States. That would bring huge amount of money, the profit. Or it will lead to what's called the accumulation of the capital. So the whole question is that when scientific knowledge, one argument is that the social sciences has to follow scientific methods That's an argument of the positivist, beginning with the classical positivist to the logical positivist. But Karl Popper added the argument about the falsification. The first man, Aristotle, who used the word, what's logic, and who discarded the spiritual argument about the investigation, research. Bacon brought the argument about the empiricism. We need to understand everything in terms of the empiricism. Aristotle brought the logical arguments. Philip brought what is called the post-positivistic argument kind of thing. And Saint Simon considered to be the, and others, they use the argument, even Durkheim, sociologist, Emile Durkheim, they use the argument about the, what is called the scientific method. Scientific methods to understand the phenomena. Scientific methods to know what constitutes the, knowledge. Emile Durkheim's, the great experiment, the experiment of the atomic groups. Here he adopted the, what's called the comparative method. One question is that whether the scientific method of the science can use the comparative method as such, vis-a-vis the common method is applied to the social sciences. But what constitutes the scientific method in that sense? Scientific method is basically believes in the logic, logical conclusion, logical arguments. And it derived with a kind of, a step. Logically, it has to be consistent. It cannot be, obscure. Logically, it has to be conclusive. For example, probably you might be knowing about a test called the titration test in water. Water becomes red. I know it pretty well because I was a science student. I can remember only one test in my whole career, that's the titration test. You put the water and it becomes red, then you stop it. We are waiting for that one when the color changes. Or we know the third volume, what's called the rule of Newton. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Or at the most, Einstein's 1 by, energy is equal to 1 by 3 mc squared something. Not the other thing, a plus b plus squared is equal to 2ab kind of thing. No, that is not the case. Some politician has said about that one. Energy is equal to mc squared something. And we know about the Avogadro's hypothesis. All the volumes of gases under similar condition contains equal number of molecules. These are the things only I could able to study. Nothing beyond that. But it believes in what is called the logic. Logical arguments. Scientific method also believes in repeating the things. It believes, it has got something called the universality of the conclusions. Take the case of the gravitational pull. Except for one or two conditions, evening, far very close to the sea coast, if you find the waves, sea waves, it is said that gravitational pull anywhere with the world is same. It cannot be changed. That's the second important thing. The test can be repeated. Why I'm trying to bring it is that whether this scientific approach can be adopted to the social sciences, and then can you argue that science is social? Where you look at the positive history here. The third important thing is that the test can be repeated anywhere. Or you have the argument about the universality of the facts. Most important thing is that it believes in creating a theory. And when compared to the social sciences, theory building and the empiricism in science is most important, it's possible. So theory building, you take case of any theory. Take the case of the Darwinian theory. Darwinian theory is basically evolution theory. Although it is clashing with the argument of the Genesis, particularly the argument of the Adam and Eve. See, it says that God created the earth within 1 week. Darwin just proposed that one. And largely it has been agreed now. The human beings are literally evolved over the years, hundreds of thousands of years. But at the same time, you can take one argument of Karl Popper's argument of falsification. It is not that the science is eternal, remember that one. In that case, the social science also can be not eternal, it's not an eternal, the argument cannot be eternal. If that is the case, the whole theoretical model collapses, whole argument collapses. Let me take up this same, evolution theory. Darwin's evolution theory is now contested. Now the whole argument, now the new argument that's coming up is that human beings are basically evolved from the African continent. We're all blacks. If you go by our DNA test, so you can say, even though Britishers, they argued that we are a mixture of many invading communities, like the Huns, Mughals, Mongols, Turks, and other things. We are not a homogeneous breed, actually. We are a hybrid breed. We are all hybrid breed. We are a Dravidian plus, Aryan plus Mongoloid breed, Huns plus blah, blah, blah. If you test your DNA, probably you'll find that you are not actually Indian. You may not agree with that, but it's a fact. Because it's literally a hybrid kind of thing. Now that theory can be dismissed. There is this, is evolution. Darwin's theory of evolution can be dismissed. It can be falsified. Falsified depends on the new factors, new data, new theory. Because the existing theories may not able to answer the questions, but new theory can say that, or new theory can create a new knowledge system altogether. Look at the argument of rotation of the earth. Earlier the first argument was that earth was flat, earth cannot rotate. Now that argument has been falsified. Galileo dismissed that argument. The consequence is completely different. But new models can be created. But basically it might end up in creating a new theory. But what science is doing is that, even positivist, it believes in the factual knowledge. Science believes in the factual knowledge. 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. It cannot be 5. For me, as a social scientist, for me, I would say that 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. No, not 4. 2 plus 2 is equal to 5. Like a plus b square is equal to 2ab plus ab squared plus b squared, kind of thing. 2ab is an extra which we can add. So, this factual knowledge, and positivists believe that, and it is a part of the scientific knowledge. Remember that one. Scientific knowledge and the scientific methods are being adopted and a part of our research methodology. It is by the observation, through the observation, including measures that we adopt to understand that. We observe a phenomenon, and we observe it in terms of, not in terms of the qualitative. In fact, the qualitative and the quantitative methods are used in the research only in the post-positivist phase. One can qualitatively measure the things as well as the quantitatively measure the things. Here there is one argument that we need to understand. This is the second debate actually. It's a part of the second debate, I would say. One is about the science as social sciences. Can it be social sciences by using the methods, using the observation methods, using the facts, factual methods, where researchers is not involved, not personally involved in putting his hands as a biased person. Here the argument is that whether researcher, positivist also, can be biased researcher. One side he has to be, adopt this something called the quantitative. You have the facts, you observe the facts, but whether the facts can be measured, yes, it has to be measured in terms of the quantitative aspect. But whether this, while measuring the quantitative, in terms of the quantitative, can social scientists be biased? Here are two arguments. One is to understand. One argument is that whether the social scientists can be value free, value neutral, or can he be value biased? Remember, the larger argument in this particular context is that the researchers needs to be value free. I should not, positivists should argue saying that I should not bring in my interest, my biases, my identities, my cultural practices, my notions, my thinking of myself and my readings into research. You should not bring anything other than just observe the phenomena. It's like, taking this particular student, giving a questionnaire. And that's the reason why positivists believe in this thing, questionnaire method. A structured question. Ask one question, for example, like a structured questions. Are you all happy with the salary that is being provided by the respective institutions? It's a simple question, right? Either you say that yes or no. There is no other third, like the computers. The computer, you have got partly yes, partly no. 90% of the teachers here, they would definitely say no. Given the package that has been given to you, it's consistently very low. So positivists definitely would say that I should not make any value judgment. I just say that yes, 93% of the teachers here, they're not happy with the salary that they draw from their institution, particularly from the management. I cannot draw the inferences. Inference saying that management is bad, management is over teachers. I remember I was a member of the college inspection committee, LIC. I had visited many colleges as a chairperson or a member. In some colleges, let me tell you about the stream, law stream, okay? I went to a law college. I asked them about their salary. They said, we are all very happy. We get good salary here. Then immediately I could be able to understand their fate. I called one by one. Then they said they were getting 2,000 salaries per month. I called the management. I asked them simply some certain questions. I said, unless and until you increase the salary of the teachers, I will not give the affiliation to this college. They said they'll be giving it. Immediately they gave. Then later on I came to know that they'll be issued the check, okay, hefty salary, but later on the same salary will be withdrawn from their account. 20,000 they'll show, 18,000 check this teacher has to pay again, and ultimately they ended up in 2,000 rupees. That's what they are exploiting. I cannot, as a positivist, deduce the argument and cannot make the value judgment. Even I cannot be biased in my dealing. I would not say that. Look, every institution has got its own bias. There are institutional bias, there are communitarian bias, there are religious bias. Most of the institutions, privately run institution, they don't appoint, they don't follow this roster system. Even there are institutions, minority run institutions, they won't appoint anybody wearing the hijab. There's an inbuilt bias against a particular community, particular sector. But as a positivist, I cannot do that. But as a post-positivist, like Karl Popper and others, I can involve myself, or the argument of the Phillips. I can involve, I can bring in my value judgment. I can interrogate the issues. I can develop and I can dismiss the earlier theories and develop my own theoretical framework and make a judgment whether that was a judgment. But I had all the powers to be biased when it becomes part of the post-positivist. I can use this empiricism as well. I can use my statistics. In fact, one argument about the positivist is that it helps in quantifying, it helps in statisticing the data, or which is we commonly use the term called the numbering the data. Like for example, we say that look, there are 40 teachers here. We are quantifying. And I'm saying that there are facts, they are literally a fact for us. And try to argue that like 40 people are not happy with the salary component of their management. That's logically correct. But you are not supposed to deduce the other arguments, given the fact that your, what's it called, positivism will not allow you to do that. So if you look at this method, positivist method, or even if you go by the in fact, there are 5 principles it is said about the positivism. And one thing is that it believes that social science should use the scientific method. That's a well-known fact. But the thing is that there should not be any difference in the logic of inquiry across the sciences or the social science as such. When I am adopting scientific method into social sciences, the logic should be the same. For example, the logic about the poverty. But it's not so easy to define poverty, given the fact that poverty is measured by many things. If you bring this scientific argument, science would say that poverty is the result of unemployment. But in social sciences, it becomes very difficult, which is where the positivists they fail. Because there are multiple ways of understanding the poverty. But they would say that logical argument should be the same. Let me take up this argument further. You have this system theory. You must be very Familiar with the system theory? It believes in the one model saying that since system method, system theory is a form of scientific method, I would say. It has a logic. It talks about the demand and supply. It believes in what is called the systemic breakdown. It believes in what is called the subsystem theory. It believes in what is called the input and output theory. It also believes in something called the environment in which the system is working. Remember the way the system theory is operating in Malaysia and system operating in America. Are they not the same? Are they not universal? Logically, they are correct. Or take the case of the argument about the political development. Political development is seen in terms of the development of the institutions. Or take the case of, I cannot bring that argument here, but let me quote it to nullify the argument. This is argument about the Samuel P. Huntington's, who talks about the political development and the clash of civilization. Huntington argued that the post-Cold War clash is a clash of 7 civilizations, out of which 2 clashes are dominating, Islamic and Anglo-Saxon. You can say that the current conflict in the Middle East between the Palestinian and the Israelis is nothing but the clash of 2 religions. There is some kind of semblance, but it's not the correct one. It does not hold good always. But the argument is that there should be universality, and the logic of inquiry should be the same everywhere. Or take the case of the scientific method, political culture, or even about the issues like the poverty and other. And there is one important thing about the post-positivist argument is that it should explain the phenomena without any bias. And it should be empirically observable. There should be human touch. It goes against the very norm of social sciences. In fact, if you look at the earlier arguments, earlier arguments were basically, metaphysical arguments. Social science was combined with the metaphysics, looking at the God as this, not only the spirit, but also he is the changing reality. He is the one who can change. If God wills, God's willingness is there, anything can be changed. Look at our philosophical narratives, whether the Dvaita, Advaita, argument of Spinoza, take the case of the medieval arguments of Church, Saint Thomas, Saint Aquinas, but not Aristotle and Plato. Remember, Aristotle and Plato were not the Christians, okay? Remember. They were all appropriated with the Britishers and they became the Christians. In fact, that's a strange thing, that's a fact also. Like our Aryabhata and Sushruta, they were not Hindus. They were made as Hindus now. This is what is happening in the case of the appropriation of the knowledge. If you look at the medieval period, up till then, even post-medieval period, up till I think the Hegel, the knowledge was largely confined to or related to or even linked to the metaphysics, spirit. Even in the Greek period, it was also linked to the, except Aristotle, Plato, and to some extent Sophist and Socrates. They all said that they tried to look at the actuality, factual thing, and try to develop the theory. Otherwise, the whole social science, nature of social science, was clubbed with the metaphysics. God was the, even in India also we had this concept called Deva Sambhuta. Deva Sambhuta is the replica of believes that God as a higher spirit is the moving force, driving force. Like we have got an argument about the karma. I think karma is not completely related. The concept of Deva everywhere. It is, it has gone into the psyche of everybody. So the whole argument is that the science, social science has to be diverse from the metaphysics. Metaphysics to observable phenomena, the sensual phenomena. And that's why the positivists argued about. And that helped in the uncovering of the social facts. Once you become the observable, use the observable phenomena, you come out with the argument about the social facts, how they are working. But immediately you cannot deduce the argument. There are 2 or 3 methods that have been adopted in the positivist. Like for example, you have got a primary method that has been adopted, knowing particularly about the experimental experiments in the lab. Or you have got the social surveys. A second method that has been in the primary. Then you might be using the structured questionnaire, polls and other things that give you the primary results, but the secondary is basically about the government reports. If you look at the positivist and the post-positivist, now as I said earlier about that, there are people who have argued about, like, Auguste Comte or Simon, Saint Simon and others. You have got a Vienna schools talking about the logical positivism and looking at the observation as the method that has to be adopted in the logical positivism. As I said earlier, the Phillips used the post-positivist argument. But interestingly, Karl Popper used 4 important requirements for the scientific theories, who talks about the logical positivism. One is that he talks about the falsification or the falsifiable theories. The second important thing is that they should be consistently logical. That's the second one. And the third important thing that there should have the adequately predictable what will happen. I would call them as a post-positivist kind of thing. You need to predict what exactly will happen in case, like for example, it talks about the poll survey. There is a possibility that in Indian context, caste is a basic phenomenon. I would say that caste identity is the basic things in India. That's the reason why even if you go by Bhagya schemes, like the last time when we had this Anna Bhagya and other things, people still believed and preferred their caste identities more than state funding or the state freebies. So there is no correlation. I used to say funny. Who are the people? Is there anybody from South Canada? From Mangalore side? Okay, this is meant to Mangaloreans, okay? I also belong to Mangalore. I used to say that, look at South Canada is supporting one particular party, right? Which is consistently opposing the present dispensation. The maximum number, highest number of women who have registered for the Grahalakshmi Yojana and also who have been traveling in the bus are come from the Mangalore region. How do you understand? Their preference is one party, but they are the one who has, who are the one who takes the benefit of the state. Highest number. I'm sorry to say, because I'm also from Mangalore. So it's an internal criticism, I have an internal critique about the whole thing. How do you understand this? This is most unpredictable. But at the same time, you can predict the behavior. If this is the logical argument, then you can predict that next election also they are not going to vote. Vote to a party which has given the benefits. So this kind of predictability is a possibility. You can guess why people they prefer one particular party or the caste. I'll give an example. When Maulana Azad became the education minister in 1951, I think, 1946 somewhere, first interim government was formed. Nehru allowed him to contest from any constituency. But in the second election, the first general election, 1951, Nehru called him to select a safe constituency for him. Maulana asked him, what do you mean by safe constituency? You select those constituencies where the Muslim population are in majority. Nehru could be able to predict the result in case he contests from the general constituency. What does it mean? It means that one can predict the outcome. Post-positivists definitely believe in this predictability. And they should provide better explanation than the rival theories. That's the last argument that Karl Popper makes. They should provide better explanations to improve the arguments, to contest the arguments, and develop. It will lead to the development of new, theories as such. So these are if you look at these arguments, one argument in the post-positivist is that one can be biased. In the positivist, you cannot be biased. You have to be impartial. You should be value-free. That's the reason why you have got a debate. Debate is that whether the science is social. That's one debate. The second, will social science able to confront science, or can it work like a science as such? Whether the social science can be similar as that of the exact science or the pure sciences. third important thing is that whether there should be value free, value neutral in the social science research. That is the third important argument. Fourth important argument is that whether one can falsify the theories in social sciences, or the social science theories is everlasting, unlike the unlike the sciences. These are four important debates. Like for example, in science, for hundreds of years, certain theories remain fixed. They do not change. Now, there might be some changes that has taken place that might be called as aberrations or might be an exceptions. But the social science theories, they undergo the changes every now and then. Take the case of Marxian theory of the state or theory of Marxism. It collapsed. Now even Chinese model or the Russian model, they have transformed into different model. Or take the case of Europe, where the Marxism has engaged itself with the green politics. Or in the case of the Latin America, they are undergoing the transformation, particularly with the Chavez politics. What I'm trying to say that it's easy in the social sciences for the interpretations. That's the reason why you got something called the interpretative positivism. And it might bring in new theoretical models. But whatever it may be, positivism and the post-positivism has helped us in many ways. For example, like it has helped us to study the ethnographic studies, to make the ethnographic analysis or the research on the caste, communities, tribes, communalism, name anything which is related to the sociology, which is related to the anthropology or the political science, or even to the business. Like the argument of, I think, Durkheim, Durkheim's argument about the suicide, or his argument about the Tom Bottomer was that the sociology who says that India could not be able to become a capitalist country because of the presence of caste. Not the Tom Bottomer, the famous sociologist. He says that, it's an ethnographic study. It provides an ethnographic understanding about the development itself. For example, arguing that the caste is preventing India becoming a capitalist country. Because there are one or two notions, One is that you cannot cross the sea, right? Secondly, it never helped in the growth of, other than the merchant capitalist class, it never helped in the growth of the big capitalist who can explore the world. And also, we believed in the, what's called, I don't call it as exploitation. I mean, if you look at the text, like the Kautilya Satyashastra and other things, you have got certain principles while doing the business. You cannot do the humbug and other things. So that's all combined in the issues about the caste. The business was not given, business is not allowed even to the Shudras, only to the merchant classes. You can make the ethnographic studies, or you can make the phenomenological research also. Why this particular phenomenon is a result of certain things. Why everybody votes for a particular party and what is its consequences. You can predict, you can analyze, you can make the logical argument. And it also helps in the other kind of research as such. Like for example, we can do the action research, action-oriented research, not the physical action kind of thing, the action in terms of the work. Like for example, like investigative actions, investigative research, you can do that one. Evaluation, evaluative action, or analytical research, you can do that one. That's the reason why, it's positivist and opposed to positivist. If you combine, you can combine. It's easy. I would say, as a social scientist, I would definitely not bother into these issues, positivist and opposed to positivist. I would say that first you dismiss the theories. For that one, you need to have the readings. Then you can develop a logical argument to dismiss the theories. Then you develop an alternative theories and the models. Whatever it may be, it helps us evaluating, analyzing, critiquing, investigating form of research, and helps us to develop our knowledge. Positivist ultimately helps us to increase the boundaries of the knowledge and also the boundaries of our social science research. Thank you very much.